There were always these programs for specialized, like, children who are particularly gifted. And I'd apply for them and I'd get rejected. And every time I would apply, I get on my hands and knees. I say the same prayer every single time. It's like a baby God.
That's fine. That's fine.
And I pray every single time. And year after year after year, I wouldn't get it. Now you're talking about all throughout elementary school, that kind of rejection. But always going to the same corner of my room and praying. Junior high school comes. I'm running out of time. There was another program that popped up. Didn't get into it. One last one. I was in 7th grade. Came up. Got in the same corner. I prayed and prayed. Every single time I got rejected, I was like, oh, that means something bigger is coming.
That's right.
Fast forward, I got into that program. It was the only program out of all those years that offered boarding school. So I could get out of my situation.
Wow.
Boarding school, I just thought shelter, right, was never going to be a question for me anymore.
Right.
Laundry, they did your laundry. I didn't have to worry about dirty clothes. Food, they had grazing hours. Like,
You can literally...
I can literally go get food whenever I wanted to get food, and it was amazing. I remember my roommate used to say, "You eat cereal like all the time." I'm like, "It's there,
Right, it's
there." I would love to know how faith has played a role in your finances. I have so many distinct memories or moments in my financial journey, some before you, some with you, where like God really came through and showed up, or God came through and was just like,
don't do that.
All your plans gone.
Oh, yeah. Don't do
this
that.
is what I have in store for you.
Sure.
Yeah. Especially like some of the faith movements that we made in regards to finances are very clear, right? But then there's others, like we move in faith, but then there's also, we follow certain rules that have been laid out to us because of our particular religion and how we walk with God, with Christ. So I guess we start with, I don't know which one is easier, but what are some of the rules, like tithing, that you've kept or modeled throughout your financial journey?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, right? And I think the biggest source of those rules come directly from the Bible, right? Like, tithing is a huge one, right? Where you have to give, well, you don't have to, but giving back 10% of whatever you give in, what you receive in, because it's kind of like that whole concept of, you know, you can't receive something if your fist is closed, so you got to be able to have it, you know, available to hand out so that you can get it back in. And then plus, you know, there's a scripture that supports that says, you know, if you give how you're supposed to give, it's paraphrasing, that God's gonna fill your storehouses, right? But even, you know, tithing is one of those ones that everyone who reads the Bible, right, they understand. But there's like many different stories and examples. Like in, I think a lot of Proverbs, they talk about how, you know, like a person is a slave to the lender, right? The borrower is a slave to the lender, or making sure that you have enough in your storehouse for when the famine comes, right?
So
like
a bunch of financial
principles that are just
embedded
in there that, you know, a lot of those things, I feel like just over the years have just become second nature to how I move with my finances.
In regards to tithing, like, did you always tithe?
Yes. Yeah, I mean,
as far as you can remember, like when you were getting allowance, you tithing?
When my parents gave me an allowance, I mean, it's one of those things where that's just the environment I was raised in. I was raised in a very faith-based, you know, we believed in Jesus. We went to church every Sunday. We went to Sunday school, Bible study. So the same principles were constantly reiterated to me. And plus, that's what I saw my parents do. I mean, you know, regardless of what people believe that the tithe is, I mean, in our community, where my parents grew up and they had the church, like that's how they supported the church. That's how the church was empowered to continue to do what they did. Well, even just take care of the community that was there. And a lot of people might say, oh, well, God, God doesn't necessarily need you in order to get his job done. But if not through us, then through who? Right? So I've always just grown up knowing that, whenever I got any kind of income, and, my understanding of it is like recurring income, because I really don't tithe when it comes to windfalls. I probably should,
What's
but
a
I
windfall?
don't. Like, for instance, if I got, something that, like, say, for instance, I sold a stock and that stock went crazy.
Oh, you don't
right?
tithe your stocks?
No, I don't tithe stock because I always reinvest it back in. Primarily reinvest it, or I pay taxes on it.
Okay.
Because, you start to run into that whole thing about, okay, do you pay tithes on the taxes?
Yeah.
Like on what you get taxed on and stuff like that. So
see, I think once you start getting into all of that technicalities and stuff, it moves away from the heart of it. So I always just say,
Fair.
listen, whatever I have, it's 10% of whatever I have. I'm not trying to figure out what the math is or whatever. It's easier to just think 10%. Now it is. Because truth be told, I didn't start tithing until maybe 2 years into our relationship. So I was making income for at least, 3-4 years without tithing. And it was always preached to me to tithe, but I never felt like I had enough money to do it. Do you feel like there's ever a time where you don't have enough money to tithe?
I've never been in a situation in my life up to this point where I did not feel like I don't have enough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I've always pretty much, and call it fortunate, call it privilege, whatever, I've always kind of lived in a place of, I got more than enough to be okay.
Yeah.
So no, I haven't really gotten to a place or been at a place. There were some times where I had to run lean, right? I'd be like, well, I know I can't do this.
Right.
Because the tithe was coming out first, but.
So you think tithing's from a place of privilege?
Well, for me, it wasn't a place of privilege because it was necessity. Like, my understanding growing up, how I was raised, that is how you did get to the next level, right? You have to show through a tangible way of trusting God by showing that 10th. That's my understanding that's how God in turn blesses you.
So it's not a place of privilege, it's a place of faith.
Faith or necessity, really. People call it safe. I just believe in it so much that I feel like the only way for me to get to that next level was to follow that rule.
That's faith.
That's
for sure faith. I never looked at it as levels, except maybe in terms of the relationship with God strengthening, for sure. Maybe I call it that than anything else. But I felt like when I was early in my career, I was like, I barely have enough to get the bills done. I don't have enough to do 10%. And then actively studying the Bible, actively going to church, the more and more I did, the more and more I said to myself, well, if the 10% were gone, would I really be out on the street? Would I really be? And then I started to just really question where the concern was coming from and the fear was coming from about losing the 10%. And I started to I made a conscious decision one day that I was just going to do it out of faith, not fear.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to keep it out of fear. I was going to give it out of faith. And I'll never forget it. We were dating. I was getting a job. It was with a company where I asked for X number of dollars. And this has never happened in my life. They came back 10% higher than what I asked for. And I was like,
there you go.
And they said to me, we think you're worth more than what you're putting out there, which was amazing for any company to say.
Yeah.
So they gave me 10% more. I cried and I was like, I worked so hard for this. This is what I've been building for. And I still didn't tithe. God literally dropped me a nugget and was like, okay, you struggling with the whole giving me the 10%.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and add that
give you extra 10% so that you just give it right back.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you what you asked for plus 10%. That way it's not. And I still didn't do it.
Sure.
It wasn't until maybe a year after that incident that the job was miserable. The job was miserable. It wasn't until I got the next job, which was 9 months later, I didn't even make it a whole year at that job, that I then did the 10%. It was a conscious decision. I just gave it back. And my my income level have just
gone up tremendously.
exponentially.
And I was gonna go back and say, like at the time when you said you didn't feel like you had enough to give, have you ever thought about that time and to think about what you were spending your money on? Like, before you respond to that, a lot of the times in the Bible, it talks about kind of like how you should spend your money, right? So if you're spending your money on frivolous things, and I don't know what your situation was, or I can't recall what your situation was at the time, but if you buy things that are more frivolous in nature, going out or doing whatever, does that show you kind of what priority you had at that time? Yeah.
I thought I deserved the things that I was getting. Like, could I have tithed and still paid my necessities? Sure. But I felt like I deserved to get my nails done. I deserved to go out and enjoy some time to myself. I deserve those things. And I think I felt like I shouldn't have to give those up. Like, doesn't God think I deserve those things too? And I think the difference was that mentality versus now is, no, God thinks I deserve far more, actually.
Wow.
And if I just open up my hands with the 10%, whatever it is, if I just open my hands, my heart, then I'm like, look where we are now.
Yeah.
From opening my hands. And I do believe that was a critical turning point in my faith and my relationship with God, was that. But I kept thinking in my own small terms and means that, yes, I deserve my nails, I deserve this. And God's like, no, you deserve far more than that.
Yeah. Well, I think too, there's a few things. The first thing is, for me, it's always been about just getting it out of the checking account as soon as it hits.
Right.
So, like, I know, like, before when I used to go to church, I used to have to wait till Sunday. But when I actually, got my own job, at that time, you could give online. So a lot of times, as soon as that paycheck hit, I immediately go in and I would just get it out. Because, the whole tithe is like the first fruits, or the first 10%.
That's right.
And the first, meaning before you pay any other bill, God gets his off top, and then you can pay all the other stuff. But I think that realigned me during that time, because I never thought or never considered having that extra 10%. I never considered it being mine. And with every paycheck, it was the first thing that was gone. It was like, all right, so my real paycheck is my paycheck minus the 10% that's automatically going out.
Yeah.
Which, again, it, in a sense, kind of forced me to realign what was priority for me.
And your budget.
My budgets were reflecting that. And I still went out, had a good time. I'm not going to say that, I didn't spend money on myself, but I also felt like I had more discipline, because I knew that, hey, for the things that were kind of most important or took priority, they got to come out first, and then whatever's left over, that's what is for me.
And then you look at tithe and giving separately?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I tithe. Tithing is probably the most important, and giving is, whenever I give.
You can do in excess, or is it?
Well,
is
and
it
it
a
doesn't.
Sacrifice of any kind? If it's
Not-
what you can do in excess?
Not normally. Giving is more of like what I feel like I'm kind of led to do at the time. So, like, for instance, if we, come across like a charitable organization, like, my giving doesn't necessarily go to a church. My tithe goes to a church. That's first and foremost. But outside of that, anything else beyond that, the giving part, like, I'm not looking to really, I'm not really looking to get like any kind of recognition for it. You know what I mean? Like,
not with tithes either, though.
Well, I know with the tithing, and we go back and forth about this, but tithing to a like a organization, like, you get a tax benefit off of that. And I know,
right.
But the giving part, I'm like, well, I'm not really looking for that. So I
would.
would.
It could be a nonprofit.
It could be a homeless person on the street. I'm not going to get like a little form that said it was a charitable.
Yeah, okay, I get
you know what
you're
I'm saying?
That makes sense.
So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely see them as two entirely different forms of giving. Tithe is not necessarily given out of abundance, that's for sure, because even in your smallest of means, you can still give the 10%. If you can still give the 10%, that's amazing. But giving for me is like, sometimes it can be a sacrifice, because even if it is in excess, even if it is in abundance, it could be a sacrifice from the standpoint of you could have used it elsewhere. You could have used it to continue to grow your personal wealth. So I do, it's very important for me to do both because I've been the recipient of someone giving to me for a very long time. So it's important for me to kind of keep that going and reciprocating it. And then I also feel like even though tithe is religion based and God led, I do think a lot of my giving is also faith.
Well, absolutely.
Led.
I
Like
think
you even mentioned it. You said if I'm led to it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel like, God, I mean, I believe in God, and I believe that, he's alive and he's within us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's some times and situations where you just get pushed, right? And it's up to you whether, we got free will, so it's up to you to decide whether or not you're going to listen to it or you're going to, follow in that direction. But, I try to stay kind of perceptive of when I feel that, because I don't feel that all the time. Sometimes, like, if I see...
And maybe not receptive to, like, giving money necessarily. It could be your time,
Oh,
too.
it could
That's
be
the other
time.
thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But, there's not, I don't know. I don't want to call it like a radar or, ESP or whatever, but I do feel like there are just times where God's like, this is where I meant for you to be at this moment. Mm-hmm. And you don't know, like, you just do it out of the, because you feel like that in your heart, but you don't know what that repercussion is going to be.
The ripple effect of it.
The ripple effect.
Yeah.
As, from what happens from that point. And, I don't know, but I just know that at that time I feel like it, and I just trust that it's going to mean something big for whatever God's purpose is for it at that time. Hopefully it's going to be fulfilled.
You may or may not see it, but you feel led to do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that reminds me of that time, I think you came home and you said, I paid for a lady's tires.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, okay. Yeah. You went to the car shop or something and a lady needed tires. And I was like, okay. You were like, I don't know. I was just listening to her and I felt like she needed it and I had it, so I gave it to her.
Yeah.
So it's just like, that was like a led moment, I guess.
It was.
Yeah.
I can't, like, there was a ton of people up in that car shop. And I remember it. And, I remember hearing the guy and, he was like, man, we really need you to replace these tires. And she had like a child with her. And she was like, well, I'm going to try to push on. And I don't know what it was. It almost felt like an out-of-body experience because before I even recognized what I was doing, like I was up there. Yeah, I was kind of up there. And I was just like, that's I got this. Don't worry about it. And
I think always listening out for God is also important, to be led in your finances, in your personal finances, and how you can show God through you, through others. It's just always important to have those extra set of ears on to hear him, and then also the obedience to actually follow through with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but so many ways how, like, just listening to God and listening to whatever spiritually leads you opens the doors to things that you never even imagined.
Yeah,
abundance
things that you didn't think was possible.
Correct.
Let me ask you this question. So, have there been times, or what are the times where something in your life happened, and it most likely related to finances, but it could be anything, where there was no doubt in your mind that was God's doing? Like what, what kind of, like, I got a couple of situations that I can think of, but have you had any situations in your life where, again, it could be related to finances or not, but you knew the outcome was what it was because of God's interaction and God's...
It was the one earlier I spoke of where the company gave me 10% more than I asked for.
Oh, sure.
And I was like, that's the tithe right there. Like, I was struggling to tithe, and that was the tithe right there. I missed that completely. And instead of crediting the Lord for it, I credited my own abilities and my own doing.
We do that from time to time.
Nah,
I mean, we as in general, humans, sweetie.
Okay.
Not you, not me.
But the other big moment is not a moment at all. You're talking about a 10-year period of this. When I was young, we were raised Jehovah's Witnesses. We had Bible study every week. We had go to the Kingdom Hall every week. I was, as a child, very faithful. Okay. I believed in God. I believed in what God could do for me. I believed even if God didn't give me what I want, it meant that there was a bigger present waiting for me. That's how much I believed in God.
Wow.
So I prayed and prayed all the time He'd get me out of the circumstances that I was in. And for whatever reason, I thought when you turn 18, something magical is supposed to happen when you turn 18. You can get out the house and you can get a job and get out those circumstances. the years leading up to it, there's many programs for kids who lack the means. I studied hard. I got great grades, but there were always barriers before me. Food insecurity, not having clean clothes all the time to go to school, and just being embarrassed about what I was wearing and how I was smelling. Those barriers were always there. And it was very embarrassing, and it made it hard for me to go to school. It made it hard for me to concentrate in school, leaving class a lot to drink water so you wouldn't hear my growling. Not wanting to sit very close to the teacher or people, even though I couldn't see because I was afraid of how I smelled. So it was like things like that made school hard, but there were always these programs for specialized, like children who are particularly gifted. And I'd apply for them and I'd get rejected. And every time I would apply, I'd get on my hands and knees. I was in the same spot in my bedroom every single time. I say the same prayer every single time. This is like a baby cry.
That's fine. That's fine.
And I prayed every single time. And year after year after year, I wouldn't get it. Sometimes there was like different stages where I made it to the second stage, but didn't make it to the third or whatever. I wouldn't get in. Now you're talking about all throughout elementary school, that kind of rejection. But always going to the same corner of my room and praying. Junior high school comes. I'm running out of time because by the time you get in high school, there really isn't a lot of those programs. So junior high school comes. There was another program that popped up. Didn't get into it. One last one. I was in 7th grade. Came up. Got in the same corner. I prayed and prayed. Every single time I got rejected, I was like, oh, that means something bigger is coming.
That's right.
Fast forward, I got into that program. It was the only program out of all those years that offered boarding school. So I could get out of my situation.
Wow.
Boarding school, I just thought shelter, right? Was never going to be a question for me anymore.
Right.
Laundry, they did your laundry. I didn't have to worry about dirty clothes. Food, they had grazing hours. Like,
you can literally
I can literally go get food whenever I wanted to get food, and it was amazing. I remember my roommate used to say, "You eat cereal like all the time." I'm like, "It's there,
right. It's
there." So it was just like all these barriers that kids shouldn't have was gone.
Sure.
With the opportunity of boarding school, I get in. I got into boarding school, and what came from that? A donor of the boarding school. I happened to get his scholarship because I worked hard. The barriers were gone. Now I could soar.
That's right.
And then I got that scholarship from that family, and now that family is permanently a part of our lives.
That's right.
That family paid for my college. That family walked me down the aisle to marry you. Do you see how amazing God is?
Yeah.
Like,
absolutely.
that's huge. And that goes back to something you said earlier. People look at stories like this and they say, it just seems like they got rich. So, no.
It's a lot of struggle.
That was 10 years of a little girl going to the same corner of her room and praying to God that He'd get her out of it. And getting rejected but still going to school, still working hard. Because she believed, okay, there must be something bigger. If He said no to this, and this is amazing, there must be something bigger. Sometimes I wish I had that same level of faith I did when I was little.
Absolutely.
But that's
and I think too,
God.
and see, that's the thing that I don't think people realize how important it is that kids got to have hope. You know what I mean? Kids got to have something that they look forward to, because a lot of times you can have kids who are in that situation, but they just have no hope. They don't think it's going to get better. They don't think the possibility is out there for it to get better.
It's hard when the environment looks the way that it looks.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so what is a child supposed to do? I mean, they turn away. They look down rather than instead of looking up. And thank God that, not only that you have the hope and you did all the work to kind of get there to that place, but He could, kind of create a situation that can be used to hopefully inspire somebody else, right? You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, I think God gives us what we have, or makes us go through what we go through so that we can inspire somebody else. And I think it's a beautiful thing that, you had that experience to go through that, because hopefully there's some, little boy or little girl who eventually you will come across that you can tell that story to, and hopefully that will get them to the next place where they can continue to pass that forward. Right.
And the funny thing is that's what, the family that raised me from high school into college, And when I asked them why they do what they do, not knowing me, not having a blood relationship with me, that's what they said. I just hope that one day you do it for somebody else.
That's amazing.
And that's where the faith keeps seeding and
yeah,
reseeding and reseeding.
absolutely.
And then,
absolutely.
you know, I do the same. You know the work that we do.
Yeah.
Trying to support kids who are gifted, but just have these barriers that shouldn't be there for kids. It really shouldn't.
And that goes, I mean, what you're bringing up is a great point, because a lot of times in the Bible, they talk about, you know, the time to sow and then the time to reap. And
or childlike faith.
Or having faith like a child, where you just believe no matter what, right? You can see all this other stuff around you, but
like,
that doesn't determine, that doesn't determine what your outcome's going to be. And again, those are like biblical principles. Going back to what we were talking about earlier, those are like the same biblical principles that, you know, if you read, if you study, if you believe, they kind of just become second nature. You know what I mean? But it's nice to actually have a scenario or a situation where you can kind of put that in like actual practice,
right?
Where it's actually shown, and then you can potentially, you know, show others, this was a exact representation of what happened in my life,
right? And I think what people got to understand is just like faith is a muscle.
It
needs to be exercised.
Absolutely.
It needs to be strengthened. It needs
Absolutely.
to be nourished.
Absolutely.
It needs to be cared for.
That's right.
It's not the lottery where you're like, okay, I'm just gonna
hit these numbers.
Put a little bit of faith with this dollar, and I'm expecting to win today. And it's like, no, it's
over time. And like you said, it's something that you gotta build, and you gotta constantly work at it.
Right.
Because there's a lot of things that can happen. I mean, just think about all those different situations that, you know, I guess you can call them failures, that could have deterred you from that, you know, you getting to where you actually need to be at.
Right.
So,
agreed.
I mean, like I have quite a few situations where I feel like God has like been so explicit that he was the one that made something happen. Now, I mean, your story is amazing, and I don't think my story is going to come anything close to that, but
it's God talking to you the way you need to be spoken to, too.
True. And I mean, like, for instance, like going into college, like I remember I got waitlisted.
Oh, yeah.
And my mom was like, you know, I don't know, my mom, I felt like God was just using her as a vessel, but she was like, look, I know you sad, you know, don't give up. You know, we're gonna apply for the college that you got into, but we're also gonna make sure you get, you know, on this wait list for the one that you want to go to, because I know that's where your heart's been set. And you know, long story short, I ended up going to that college that I got waitlisted on, and I probably think that was like the hardest, probably by far, one of the hardest times of my life was getting through that school. Like, I do not wish it on nobody. People ask me, oh, would you like to go back to college? Absolutely not. But I look at what has happened since then. So all those trials, all those tribulations, all those late nights, all those thinking, you know, those nights I was thinking I wasn't good enough and all that stuff. And now to where I am, like, I'm just so thankful of being able to get through that. Now, could I have gone to that other college and maybe have a similar outcome? Probably, right? But I don't know.
But even how it got paid for.
How it got paid for.
Absolutely. You know,
absolutely.
with Mama Sharon working for that school.
That's right.
Mama Sharon didn't come into your life and it was like rainbows and unicorns.
No, it wasn't.
You know what I mean?
It wasn't.
That came from a place of divorce.
Absolutely.
Mama Sharon came from a place of entering your world because your parents got divorced, which isn't the happiest or the prettiest point in your life.
Right.
But she came into your life, and she was a big reason or way that college got paid for.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think, you know, it's really easy to feel in that moment that when certain things are happening, like it's the end of the world.
Right.
But you don't recognize that God has a bigger plan, especially while you're in that moment, that God has a bigger plan, that he's working it out. Whereas what you might take and think is bad, he's actually using it for good.
Right.
And that's one of the things that I think, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is one of the absolute best things, having, you know, 4 years of my out-of-state tuition basically 80% covered.
That's right.
And I was able to walk out, you know, across that graduation stage with debt free.
Yeah.
So that was pretty amazing.
And that's, again, that was faith.
Absolutely.
Faith through the storm.
That's true. Absolutely.
And the other side was debt freedom and a solid education. That's amazing.
Absolutely.